The phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m. Michael's name lit the screen, and my heart stopped before I even opened it. The words came fast, urgent, designed to trigger panic. "Sophia, it's Dad. He's crashing. The doctors say hours, maybe less. You have to come now. This is real." My stomach dropped into darkness so complete I could barely breathe, could barely think about anything except getting to him. I threw clothes into a bag with shaking hands, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely grip the fabric. I didn't even finish packing properly. I just grabbed what I could and ran, leaving lights on and doors unlocked. I booked the first flight out of Denver before I even left my apartment, tears streaming down my face as I fumbled with my credit card and my phone, nearly dropping both. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would burst through my ribs and onto the floor. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't do anything but move, propelled by pure panic and love and the desperate need to reach him in time, to hold his hand, to tell him I loved him one more time. His second text arrived while I waited at security, my legs barely holding me up. "False alarm earlier, but it's real this time. Hurry." My hands were ice as I read those words. A false alarm. What did that mean? My stomach twisted. I boarded that plane shaking, replaying his calm tone over and over, wondering if I'd heard panic underneath or something else entirely, something calculated and rehearsed. The flight felt endless, every minute stretching into hours. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't do anything but stare out the window into the darkness. By the time the wheels touched down in Chicago hours later, another message was waiting in my phone, cold and final. "He's gone. You were too late." I stared at those words for what felt like an eternity, numb and frozen, unable to process their meaning. My legs wouldn't move. My lungs wouldn't work. The plane around me seemed to be spinning. Something felt deliberately off about the timing. Something felt designed, orchestrated. And deep in my bones, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I knew I'd just been played. The hospital corridor smelled of bleach and grief and something chemical I couldn't name, a scent that made my eyes water. Michael's silhouette blocked the doorway to Dad's room like a wall, immovable and dark. No tears streamed down his face, no sign of the devastation that should have been written there. Just crossed arms and an expression carved from stone, cold and unreadable. "You missed it by 20 minutes, he said. His voice flat and controlled, almost rehearsed. I pushed past him without answering, unable to trust myself to speak. The bed was stripped bare, stripped of dignity, stripped of everything that mattered. Monitors were dark and silent, all the beeping and buzzing that meant life just erased from the room. A single wilted rose lay on the pillow. Mom's favorite flower, but Mom had been dead for 8 years. Why would Dad have that here? Michael's eyes followed my every movement with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "He asked for you," he added softly, almost tenderly, but something in his voice sounded wrong. Kept saying your name at the end. I couldn't process the words. The relatives hovered in the hallway, murmuring sympathy and offering condolences, but I could feel their eyes. Their pity shifted into something harder, something sharper. Judgment. Disappointment. My brother never blinked, never moved from his position by the door. That silence screamed louder than any sob ever could, louder than screams, louder than accusations. It screamed a truth I wasn't ready to hear. Our childhood home felt smaller somehow, suffocating under the weight of black dresses and casseroles and the overwhelming presence of collective grief. The house that had once felt spacious and full of light now felt like a tomb. Michael stood center stage in the living room, accepting hugs like an actor who'd rehearsed this role 1,000 times. His movements fluid and practiced. He recounted Dad's final coherent words with theatrical precision, milking every detail for maximum impact. How proud he was of the son who stayed close, who sacrificed everything, who never abandoned him. I lingered near the staircase, watching from the shadows, invisible. No one looked at me. No one offered hugs to the daughter who wasn't there. Aunt Beatrice patted my arm with a sympathetic smile that cut like glass. Her eyes filled with something that looked almost like pity. Michael said you were tied up with work again, she whispered, her voice dripping with subtle disapproval. Her tone carried disappointment sharp enough to draw blood, and I realized in that moment that Michael had already rewritten the narrative. He'd told everyone I chose my career over our dying father. I smiled tightly, said nothing because what could I say? Later in the kitchen I caught him telling Cousin Paul, his voice low and confidential. Sophia always put herself first. She was always like that. Dad felt abandoned by her. He told me that near the end. My nails dug into my palms hard enough to leave crescents. I slipped upstairs to Dad's study quietly, my heart pounding. The door was ajar like an invitation or a trap. Dad's oak desk still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, a scent that transported me to childhood in an instant. I could remember sitting here when I was small, watching him work, feeling safe in his presence. The bottom drawer was locked, had been locked since I was 12 years old, when Michael broke the first key and Dad decided to keep it closed forever. I slid the letter opener along the seam carefully, not wanting to leave obvious marks, and popped it quietly with a soft click. My hands trembled as I pulled it open. Inside, stacks of bank statements with dates I didn't recognize, a small brass key with a number on it, and an envelope addressed to me in Dad's shaky handwriting. For Sophia, after I'm gone. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was what I needed. My heart raced as I tucked it inside my blazer, feeling the weight of it against my ribs. Footsteps creaked on the stairs, slow and deliberate, as if someone was walking carefully to stay quiet. Michael's shadow appeared in the doorway like a nightmare taking physical shape, materializing out of the darkness, looking for something. His smile was polite, impeccable, but his eyes held something predatory underneath, something ancient and hungry. I met his gaze evenly, refusing to flinch or look away. Just memories, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady and calm. He lingered a second too long before turning away, his jaw working, and I knew he was calculating something, weighing options, deciding how to proceed. I had just made my first real move in a game I was only beginning to understand. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and coffee, and the accumulated dust of 1,000 secrets whispered in confidence. Michael sat ramrod straight in the leather chair, his posture perfect, already wearing Dad's watch on his wrist like a crown, claiming it before anyone else could. The attorney, Mr. Brennan, cleared his throat and began reading in that monotone voice lawyers use, the kind that drains all emotion from words. Equal split of assets, house to be sold, proceeds divided evenly between the two children. Michael's jaw twitched, barely perceptible, but I caught it, stored it away like evidence. Then came the personal bequests, the things that actually mattered. My mother's jewelry to me, the pieces I'd always loved, the pearls she wore on her wedding day, the emerald ring, Dad's vintage car to Michael, his pride and joy. But then came the final clause, and the lawyer's voice changed slightly, gaining emphasis. My coin collection, valued at approximately $380,000, goes entirely to Sophia. The room went absolutely still. You could have heard a pin drop. Michael's knuckles whitened as his hands gripped the armrest, the leather creaking under the pressure. I watched his face carefully, saw the calculation happen in real time. He shot me a look that could curdle milk in an instant, a look filled with rage and something darker, betrayal, as if I had somehow orchestrated this. I kept my face blank, showing nothing, but inside something shifted. The real game had just begun, and he had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead, already planning, already preparing for war. Back at the house that afternoon, Michael cornered me in the hallway near the stairs, his body blocking my path, positioning himself like a predator. "You don't even like coins," he said, his voice dripping with fake worry and concern, each word carefully calibrated. "Why would you fight over them?" He leaned against the wall with studied casualness, but his knuckles were still white. Dad was confused at the end. The medication clouded his judgment. You know how much pain he was in. I studied the way his eyes darted to the study door, calculating, always calculating his next move. He wasn't confused, I said quietly, my voice steady as steel, meeting his intensity with perfect calm. He was clear. Clearer than he'd been in months. Michael's laugh was sharp and brittle, a sound that didn't contain a shred of genuine emotion. You weren't here, he said, stepping closer, his voice taking on an edge. You don't know what he was like those last months. You don't know what I had to deal with. He leaned closer, invading my space deliberately, his voice dropping. Maybe we should talk about power of attorney next. Maybe we should revisit some things. Maybe the will isn't as final as you think. I could smell the coffee on his breath, could feel the heat radiating from his body as he tried to intimidate me. My pulse stayed calm, controlled, measured. He still thought I was the same trusting sister from college, the one who believed his stories and accepted his version of reality without question. That was his first big mistake, and it would cost him everything. Late that night, I spread the bank statements across my childhood bed like a map to betrayal, each page telling part of the story. Regular transfers, $5,000 monthly, always on the 10th, to an account in Michael's name labeled care expenses in a way that suggested legitimacy. But the dates didn't match the actual care visits documented in Dad's calendar. And Dad's signature looked forged on the last 6 transfers. The pen pressure wrong, inconsistent, the angle off by degrees that only trained eyes would catch. I photographed every single page with methodical precision, using my phone's best camera, making sure the images were crisp and clear. The bank statement numbers, the dates, the signatures, all preserved in digital format. Then I opened the envelope. My fingers traced the seal, and something stopped me. Not fear, but strategy. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. Not until I had built an unshakable case. Downstairs, Michael's laughter floated up from the living room, surrounded by relatives who believed his version of events without question, who hung on his words like gospel. I could hear him describing Dad's final days, embellishing, adding details that sounded true but probably weren't. I locked my door, set my phone to record ambient sound. Paranoia. Maybe. But silence had already cost me too much, and I wasn't going to let it cost me again. Next morning I drove to St. Mary's Hospital with a plan forming in my mind, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The nurse at reception recognized me immediately, her eyes softening with sympathy. Your brother picked up the death certificate yesterday, she said, her tone suggesting something more beneath the surface, something she wasn't quite comfortable mentioning. I requested my own copy and asked about visitor logs, keeping my voice casual and normal, as if I were just another grieving relative. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, and I could see her weighing whether to comply. Then she printed them out. Michael signed in at 4:12 p.m. the day Dad died. I arrived at 5:03 p.m. But the nurse log, the detailed log that tracked every movement in the wing, showed him leaving at 4:48 p.m., before the official time of death at 5:15 p.m. My hands shook as I held the papers. He had been there. He had been in that room. He left. And then he let me race across the country for nothing, let me suffer the humiliation of arriving too late. I asked the nurse casually, "Do you remember what my brother was doing when he left?" She looked uncomfortable. I shouldn't say, but he seemed upset when he walked past the desk. "He didn't say goodbye to your father." I almost marched downstairs to shove those logs in his face, to confront him right there in front of everyone, to demand answers and watch him squirm. But something held me back, a voice that sounded like Dad's, like his wisdom accumulated over decades of dealing with difficult people. Instead I breathed, counted to 20 slowly, forced myself into absolute stillness, into the patience that would ultimately destroy him. Michael was in the kitchen making coffee for everyone with his perfect host routine, playing the devoted son flawlessly, moving with practiced ease. "Sophia, you look pale," he said, turning with genuine concern written all over his face. His voice filled with false solicitude. "Sit down. You need to eat something." I declined politely, said I needed air, said I needed to clear my head. Outside, under the old maple tree where Dad used to read his newspapers and fall asleep in the afternoon sun, I reread the visitor log. One detail burned into my mind like a brand. He signed out alone. No nurse escort. No one holding his hand as he left. No final goodbye. Dad died without anyone there because Michael chose to walk away. Maybe he was angry. Maybe he decided Dad wasn't worth waiting for. Maybe he thought the death was inevitable anyway. Whatever the reason, he had abandoned our father in his final moments. My resolve hardened into steel then, cold and unbreakable. Patience would be my weapon now. Strategic, careful, methodical patience. With a small brass key from Dad's drawer, I went to First National Bank the next morning, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, led me to the vault in silence, the massive door opening with a hydraulic hiss. Inside box 417, 3 USB drives labeled with dates spanning the last year, another sealed letter in Dad's handwriting marked "Read this one first," and a notarized document dated 3 weeks before Dad's death. It revoked Michael's medical power of attorney completely and named me instead. Attached was a doctor's note in clinical handwriting. Patient reports coercion regarding financial decisions. Patient expresses fear of son's intentions regarding inheritance. Patient appears lucid and of sound mind despite current medical condition. My throat closed. Dad had known. He'd tried to protect himself and me before it was too late. He'd documented everything, preserved evidence, and left it for me to find. I photographed everything with shaking hands, making sure each document was perfectly clear and readable. The bank's seal, the dates, the signatures, all preserved. I sealed the box again carefully, making sure it looked untouched. Michael had no idea what Dad left behind. No idea that our father had anticipated this, had built a case against his own son, had left me the tools I needed to expose him. I walked out of that bank feeling like I held the entire weight of the truth in my hands. At dinner that evening I stayed quiet while relatives toasted Michael's devotion with wine glasses raised high, their voices dripping with admiration and respect. Everyone praised his sacrifice, his dedication, his love for our dying father. He soaked it in like rain on parched earth, basking in their approval with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I smiled, nodded, played the grieving sister perfectly, all while my mind was calculating, planning, preparing for the endgame. Then casually, as if the thought had just occurred to me during the conversation, I mentioned, "Dad left me some interesting paperwork actually. Personal things I didn't know about." Michael's fork paused midair. I could see his hand tense, the small fork trembling almost imperceptibly. His jaw tightened like he was grinding his teeth. "Like what?" he asked, his voice careful and controlled, each word measured and deliberate, fighting to keep his tone neutral. "Just personal things," I said, changing the subject smoothly, calmly, as if it were nothing important or worth lingering on. But I'd planted the seed. That night, I watched him through the kitchen window from my vantage point, pacing the driveway in the darkness, his figure illuminated by the porch light, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesticulating wildly. He was talking to someone, his voice rising and falling with intensity one could almost hear through the glass. He was rattled, scared. Let him wonder. Let him speculate about what Dad had left for me. Let him start making mistakes. Every nervous glance, every tense conversation, every moment of panic was ammunition I could use later. I could afford to be patient. I had time. And I had truth on my side. Aunt Beatrice called an emergency family discussion about the coin collection, her voice concerned over the phone. Michael arrived first, already armed with arguments, his briefcase heavy with paperwork and documents. "Sophia doesn't need them," he said to the assembled relatives, his voice dripping with concern for their financial well-being. "She lives across the country. She never even comes home. She abandoned this family." I let him talk, let him build his case brick by brick, laying the foundation for his narrative. When my turn came, I simply said, "Dad decided. It's in writing." He scoffed loudly, dismissing my words with a wave. Dad was on heavy medication at the end. His mind wasn't clear. You know how these things go. I met his eyes directly, holding his gaze without wavering. Not when he revoked your power of attorney. The room froze. Everyone's eyes snapped to Michael, watching his face for a reaction. His smile cracked for the first time, revealing something raw underneath. Panic, anger, fear. I excused myself before he could recover, standing and walking out with perfect composure, leaving him to face the silent questions in their eyes. One USB held security footage from Dad's home camera, installed after a fall Michael blamed on loose rugs, a convenient excuse for an installation that Dad never authorized. I plugged in the drive with trembling hands. The first clip showed Michael guiding Dad to the desk with a hand on his shoulder, pen already in hand, saying with false cheerfulness, "Sign here, Dad. Just routine paperwork. For your accounts. It'll help with the bills." Dad looked confused. His eyes unfocused from the medication cocktail Michael had him on. Dad's hand trembled visibly. Michael pressed it down against the paper, his hand over Dad's, forcing the pen forward in a signature that didn't match his normal writing. "There you go," Michael said, his voice dripping with false encouragement. "You did great, Dad." Another clip. Michael removing papers from the safe while Dad slept in his armchair, exhausted from pain medication, the timestamp matching the forged transfers exactly. Michael stuffed documents into a manila envelope. His movements quick and practiced, like he'd done this before. He pulled out what looked like duplicate papers, replacing the originals with fakes. My stomach turned to ice. I backed everything to the cloud immediately, triple encrypted it, stored it in multiple locations. I uploaded it to secure backup servers that even Michael couldn't access. My brother had underestimated technology. And he had severely underestimated me. Back in my room, I held Dad's final envelope in trembling hands. My fingers traced the seal, the paper thin with age. Inside, his handwriting dated 2 days before he died. "Sophia, if you're reading this, Michael has already started. Forgive him if you can. Protect yourself first. The truth is in the second letter." Second letter. I searched the box contents again desperately. Nothing. Then I remembered. The lawyer mentioned Dad updated his will twice in his final weeks. The original was missing. Michael had it. Or thought he did. But where would Dad hide something precious? Where would he hide the real truth? Michael called a private meeting, his voice urgent over the phone. "I found something," he said when I met him in the study, holding an envelope, Dad's handwriting but different paper. Older. Dad changed his mind about the coins. He wanted me to have them. I studied the signature carefully, comparing it to the documents I'd already seen. Slightly off. The pressure wrong. The way the letter flowed differently. "Interesting," I said calmly, my voice betraying nothing. "Because the notary who witnessed the real codicil is meeting me tomorrow." His face drained of all color. "You don't have," he started, panic flooding his voice. "I do," I said quietly. I walked out. He didn't follow. The first real crack had appeared in his foundation. Elderly Mrs. Hargrove met me at her kitchen table with tea and documents spread before her like a quilt. "Your father was lucid," she said firmly, her voice steady and sure. "Completely lucid. He insisted on revoking Michael's authority. He said his son was pressuring him for money, creating unnecessary expenses, draining him dry." She showed me the original codicil, coins to me, plus a trust clause protecting the estate from any undue influence claims. "Michael tried to visit me last week," she continued, her eyes sad. "I refused to see him, sent him away. I could see the desperation on his face. I thanked her with genuine gratitude, took certified copies of everything. Michael was running out of lies. Michael waited on the porch when I returned, his face arranged in an expression of deep remorse. "I was wrong," he said, his eyes wet with tears that didn't seem genuine. "Grief made me crazy. I wasn't thinking clearly." I listened silently as he continued, his words flowing smoothly. Let's split everything fairly. You can have the coins. Just don't make this public. I tilted my head slightly. Public. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Family doesn't air dirty laundry. We protect each other. I smiled faintly. Dad already did. His mask slipped then, anger flashing across his features like lightning. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging in. I pulled free without flinching, my body moving on pure instinct. Don't touch me again, I said quietly, my voice carrying an edge that made him step back. In Dad's study, behind the false panel I remembered from childhood, the one we'd used as a secret hiding spot when we were kids, was the second letter. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Sophia, Michael drained the emergency fund. He forged documents on my accounts. If I die soon, he did it deliberately. Use the footage. Protect the family name. For everyone but him. Tears came then, hot and silent, dripping onto the paper. Dad had known. His own son might kill him slowly, methodically, with greed and calculated lies. I sealed it back up carefully. Tomorrow the estate lawyer would see everything. Michael organized a reconciliation dinner. His voice hopeful on the phone, inviting relatives. Everyone arrived wanting to believe the conflict was over, that we could move past this as a family. He raised a glass with a smile. To moving forward. To family. Then he slid a document across the table. New will contest papers, claiming I had coerced Dad in his final days, taken advantage of his weakness. I laughed softly, shaking my head. You brought the wrong envelope. I placed the real codicil beside it, along with the notary's certification. Gasps rippled around the table. Michael's hand shook. This is fake, he whispered. Aunt Beatrice stared at him, her expression changing from concern to horror. Is it? For once he had no answer. Alone in the study later that night, Michael cornered me against the desk, desperation flooding his face. His eyes were wild, frantic, like a caged animal. Destroy the footage, he said, his voice cracking under the weight of his panic. I'll give you half of everything. Everything. You can have it all. The coins, the house, the car. All of it. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the funeral. I saw my brother, yes, but I also saw a stranger. A man capable of things I'd never imagined. Half of what you stole? I asked quietly. His face twisted with rage, the desperation transforming into anger. You were never here. I did everything. I managed his medications, his finances, everything while you built your perfect life in Denver. His voice was rising now, out of control. He preferred you. Do you know how that felt? You left him to die, I said quietly, my voice steady and low. That's everything. He lunged toward me then, his body moving with rage. I stepped aside without thinking, my body responding on pure survival instinct. He crashed into the desk. The USB fell out of my pocket onto the floor with a soft click. He saw it. He stared at it for a moment, then panic flooded his eyes. Real panic, the kind that comes when you realize you're caught. He sank to the floor, his body collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. I didn't mean to, he whispered. The medication was expensive. The home care was expensive. I just needed time to figure it out. I recorded every word on my phone, hidden in my sleeve. Time to drain his accounts. He nodded, broken. I thought if he passed quickly, the life insurance would cover everything. I could fix it. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then he whispered, "Please don't show anyone." I crouched down to his level. Too late. I walked out. The family waited in the living room. I connected my laptop to the TV with steady hands, my fingers moving with practiced precision. The room went deathly quiet as footage played across the screen, filling the air with the unbearable truth. Everyone watched in stunned silence. Michael forging signatures with Dad's trembling hand, removing documents from the safe, leaving Dad alone in his bed to die. Aunt Beatrice covered her mouth, her face turning pale. Cousin Paul stood up slowly, unable to watch anymore. "Michael, how could you?" My brother stared at the screen, his face gray as death itself. "It wasn't supposed to." I cut him off by playing the audio recording. His own voice filling the room, confessing everything. His words echoed through the living room. If he passed quickly, the life insurance would cover everything. I could fix it. The confession hung in the air like poison gas. Then I played Dad's final letter, read in his weak but clear voice. "I always trusted you to do the right thing, Sophia. Even when it hurt. I never stopped believing in you." Everyone heard the truth. Finally. The voice of a dying man, filled with pain but also with faith in his daughter. The contrast was devastating. Law enforcement arrived 2 days later with papers and questions. Financial fraud, elder abuse, attempted coercion. Michael didn't fight. He sat handcuffed at the kitchen table while relatives watched in stunned silence, their faces carved from stone. I handed over every file, every recording, every piece of evidence. No screaming, no tears. Just facts, presented cleanly and completely. He looked at me once across the table, pleading silently. I looked away. The police led him out in handcuffs. The door closed softly behind them. The house sold quickly to a young family who loved its bones. Proceeds went into a trust for Dad's favorite charity. Hospice care for families who couldn't afford it. I kept the coins initially, then donated most of them to the same charity. Relatives slowly reached out, apologies heavy with guilt and shame. I forgave where I could, where the forgiveness felt genuine. Michael wrote letters from prison. I never replied. Some silences are permanent. I scattered Dad's ashes under the maple tree, alone on a quiet morning. Wind carried them away. For the first time in years I breathed freely. Months later, I opened the very first envelope again, the one from Dad's locked drawer. One line I hadn't noticed before jumped out at me. "I always trusted you to do the right thing, Sophia. Even when it hurt." I folded it carefully, placed it beside Mom's photo on my shelf. The revenge wasn't loud or cruel or violent. It was truth, delivered cleanly and completely. Michael destroyed himself with arrogance and lies. I simply stopped protecting his secrets. And in that silence, in that truth, I finally came home.